The woman approached Shinkawa, commenting that she had come to meet him but was pleasantly surprised to find another guest present. She introduced herself as Tomiko Hojo, a producer for the JBS variety show Go For It Sports Day. As she handed her business card to both Shinkawa and his associate Uyu, she apologized for appearing unannounced, explaining she had been unable to find any contact information. While the two fighters looked at the card, Tsuji introduced herself to the producer, stating she is from rank 7, offering her own card. Tomiko apologized, admitting she had run out of hers. The coach then asked if the show was well known. Uyu confirmed its fame, noting that it features top athletes from various sports who come to talk and demonstrate their skills. Seizing the moment, Tomiko told Shinkawa they were hoping to feature him, the current hot topic on their show. The coach quickly intervened, stating that Shinkawa's schedule was quite full. Unfazed, Tomiko pressed on, asking when he would be available. Learning he would be in town for another 10 days, she excitedly declared they had a week until filming. She assured them it wasn't a last-minute casting call and clarified the terms. The filming would last 2 hours for an appearance fee of 40,000 yen. Flustered by the offer, the coach turned to Tsuji for advice. "Is 40,000 yen for 2 hours a good deal?" he whispered. She confirmed it was an excellent offer. Tomiko immediately presented them with a contract. As the coach examined the surprisingly detailed document, Uyu noticed a troubling clause. Neither party shall be held legally responsible for any injuries or unforeseen circumstances that may occur during filming. When questioned, Tomiko brushed it off as a mere formality, explaining that network higher-ups were simply overly cautious. The coach insisted he needed to consult with Shinkawa first. As she left the room, Tomiko, looking slightly annoyed, reluctantly agreed, but reminded them to decide by the end of the day, as she would need to offer the spot to someone else. The coach declared that something smelled fishy. "I have to agree, this whole deal feels troublesome, especially that clause. And Tomiko, there's just something about her, she looks slick, almost evil. I don't trust her one bit." The situation reminded Tsuji of the infamous Yukio Hatanaka incident from 3 years prior. She explained how the flyweight champion had appeared on a variety show, only to be forced by the station to spar with an ordinary man 20 kg heavier, resulting in career-threatening injuries. The coach grimly remarked, "The physical injury must have been tough, but the mental damage must have been considerable too." Uyu regretted not pressing Tomiko for more details, but the coach comforted him, saying it was their job to be cautious. He turned to Shinkawa, urging him to focus on training for his next fight and avoid the risk of injury on a TV show. Interrupting his coach mid-sentence, Shinkawa, who had been silently punching a sandbag, announced, "He will do it." He argued that despite his recent fame, only hardcore MMA fans truly knew his name. To reach the next level, he needed more mainstream exposure. The coach was caught off guard by what Shinkawa said, realizing that the UFC valued a fighter's star power, their ability to attract new fans, just as much as their actual fighting skill. He hadn't expected Shinkawa to be thinking that far ahead. Shinkawa continued to unleash a furious combination on the bag. Uyu chimed in, recalling how a foreign champion who beat him was mocked on a variety show and forced to spar under absurd rules. Tsuji added that the contract practically warned of injury. Still, Shinkawa stayed firm, insisting it would be fine. Meanwhile, news headlines buzzed with Shinkawa's recent success. Kento Shinkawa wins decisively against Big Thunder's Tenshin Uo in a away match, and Shinkawa is set to appear on the variety show Go For It Sports Day. The news reached the FFC executive meeting and the president was very angry. He shouted, "He's going on TV without telling us, this is disrespectful." The assistant tried to calm him, saying that the Shinkawa effect had made much more money than expected and the sponsors were very happy. The president remained unappeased. He argued that Shinkawa was not even under their management and warned that the sponsors would scatter like spiderlings as soon as Shinkawa signed with another organization. Then the assistant delivered more bad news. Their rival Big Thunder had also made an offer to Shinkawa. The president grew worried, exclaiming that first the UFC and now Big Thunder were trying to steal Shinkawa. He warned that if they did not act quickly, everything would fall apart. With grim determination, the president issued his orders. He instructed them to find Shinkawa's weakness before he signed with the UFC. He believed even the strongest fighters had weaknesses and matchup problems. If necessary, they should bring in someone from a higher weight class or a different fighting style. He empowered them to use any means necessary to find a fighter who could defeat Shinkawa. By making the UFC doubt Shinkawa's ability, they could create an opportunity for the FFC to secure the once-in-a-century talent. Clenching his fist, the president commanded that no matter what, Shinkawa must not be allowed to slip away. The scene shifted to the TV studio. Shinkawa sat in the makeup chair preparing for the show. The coach remarked that once Shinkawa was cleaned up, he was quite handsome. Tsuji added that with his looks, Shinkawa could easily be an actor. Tomiko entered with a man and explained the show's format. The MC would lead the conversation and Shinkawa would simply answer questions, possibly with a short demonstration or sparring session. The coach confirmed he had seen past episodes but stressed that Shinkawa had an eye injury and needed to avoid any hits to his face. Tomiko cheerfully agreed, reassuring everyone that they only wanted to introduce the handsome fighter to the world. While they were talking, noticed Suji working on her laptop. It had 2 cameras on the back yet too. Most laptops don't even have one back there, but this thing looked more like an iPhone than a laptop. I'm pretty sure she was recording, or maybe the author just has weird ideas about tech. The man with Tomiko said the sparring would be just for fun against a comedian with a good build. The coach reluctantly agreed that it should be fine. The show began with 2 hosts shouting enthusiastically, "Go for it, Sports Day!" The male host introduced the special guest with great excitement. Today's guest is this man, the hot topic handsome fighter, Kento Shinkawa. Backstage, the coach felt a wave of apprehension. He warned Shinkawa that if anything felt off, he should withdraw immediately. Shinkawa silently nodded, but his distant reply only increased the coach's unease. As Shinkawa walked toward the stage, his inner thoughts revealed his struggle. The hallucinations and panic were still ongoing. He caught his reflection in a passing mirror, feeling a wave of dissociation. What was real and what was false? He knew he had to find out for himself as he stepped forward, his expression calm and focused. In the studio, the female host asked Shinkawa the final question of the segment. It was an unusual one. Who would win in a fight between a professional fighter and a much larger average person? She laughed, saying it was such an interesting question that they wanted to test it live, right here, with the strongest fighter they knew, Shinkawa. She then explained she had already gotten his permission in advance for a sparring session and asked him to confirm. Shinkawa nodded calmly, saying it would be fine as long as it was a light demonstration. The male host jumped in, telling Shinkawa that there were 2 comedians backstage eager to face him. Just in case the match ended quickly, they had brought in a second participant so the show wouldn't be over too soon. Upon hearing this, the coach's expression hardened with irritation. The host then gave the signal and the 2 comedians entered. The comedians stepped forward with heavy, confident footsteps. They didn't say a word, but their body language made it clear they were there to fight. Both were broad-shouldered and tall, towering over Shinkawa. But Shinkawa didn't flinch. Despite the odds, he stood still, calm and steady, ready for whatever came next. The host continued, revealing that the show had prepared boxing ring and the sparring would follow boxing rules. Both the coach and Suji looked surprised, but Shinkawa didn't hesitate. He accepted the conditions without question. Suji turned to the coach. "It's still a combat sport. That should be fine, right?" she asked. The coach shook his head. "MMA and boxing are completely different. Just because you're good at running doesn't mean you can play soccer right. Even if there's some overlap, they're different games entirely." He explained that in MMA, if an opponent rushed in, a fighter could create distance with kicks or use clinch techniques to regain control. In boxing, however, once distance is closed, options become limited, especially for someone trained in MMA. "It's like having no weapons at all," he said. Suji nodded, beginning to understand. She added that even if the comedians were average people, wasn't it dangerous to pit them against a lightweight like Shinkawa? They didn't seem like complete amateurs either. They moved like athletes. Then the coach's eyes narrowed. He noticed the gloves the comedians were wearing, 8-ounce gloves with no headgear. His expression darkened. "Damn it," he muttered. "They set us up." Now, if you're wondering why the coach suddenly looked so tense, let me explain. Those gloves the comedians were wearing, 8 ounces. That might not mean much if you're not into combat sports, but trust me, it's a big deal. See, lighter gloves like these don't cushion punches much. They're designed for serious, competitive fights, not friendly sparring. Less padding means more force goes straight into the opponent, and with no headgear, that's just asking for trouble. The coach knew exactly what this meant. This wasn't just for laughs anymore. They weren't trying to introduce the handsome MMA fighter to the audience. No, this was a setup, a trap dressed up as entertainment. 2 heavy, athletic guys, boxing rules, small gloves, no protection, everything was designed to push Shinkawa into a corner. And the worst part, most people wouldn't even notice, but the coach did. He saw it clear as day, and now so do you. At that moment, Shinkawa placed his mouthguard in. One of the comedians, grinning widely, scoffed, "We don't care if you're some top MMA fighter or whatever. In the ring, we're regulars on the national boxing team. This is our turf." The comedian raised a hand, signaling for Shinkawa to enter the ring. Without hesitation, Shinkawa stepped forward, accepting the challenge. Those around him were stunned at how quickly he agreed. The female host suddenly shivered. "You okay?" the male host asked. She spoke quietly, her eyes still locked on Shinkawa. His expression unsettled her. It wasn't angry or intense, just calm in a way that felt unnatural. The match began. Both fighters took their stance. Shinkawa opened with a probing jab. The first comedian, confident, raised his guard. Shinkawa struck from the side, but the comedian fired back with a punch. Shinkawa smoothly dodged, keeping his distance. The comedian then launched into a flurry of strikes, trying to overwhelm him, but Shinkawa moved with precision, dodging every blow with swift, fluid motion. Meanwhile, Tomiko watched from the sidelines. In her mind, a thought formed: this is why she loves idiots. Guys who have only ever done sports are so easy to manipulate. Her eyes stayed locked on Shinkawa. Back in the ring, Shinkawa's mind wandered briefly back to another life, a time that felt ancient. He remembered fighting for survival in a brutal, bare-knuckle world. His style now mirrored those old instincts. In that distant memory, bodies piled around him. He had learned early that boxing was the first skill he needed to survive unarmed. In the present, Shinkawa struck the comedian clean in the face. The comedian stumbled from the blow, dazed. Furious, he swung back with power, but Shinkawa dodged and countered with a punch straight to his chest. The hit made the comedian stagger, swinging wildly in desperation, but Shinkawa leaned back just in time and created distance. Suji leaned toward the coach. Shinkawa's footwork and distance control are completely throwing them off, but normal jabs won't be enough against bodies like that. Shouldn't we stop this? The coach shook his head. He knows what he's doing. Shinkawa's jabs aren't normal. They feel like bear claws ripping through flesh, straight to the bone. Right then, Shinkawa delivered a brutal hook to the comedian's side. The coach continued: if Shinkawa gets serious, they won't last. Tomiko, watching from the side, clenched her jaw. Her smile was gone. The fight was not going the way she expected. In the ring, the comedian gritted his teeth. So what if he's showing off? He's still just a lightweight, he thought. He charged forward, believing Shinkawa's punching power couldn't last. As a former heavyweight boxer, he thought Shinkawa was nothing. He threw a powerful punch, but Shinkawa ducked cleanly under it. The comedian tried to corner him with a barrage of strikes, but again, Shinkawa slipped through every one. Frustrated, the comedian began to hesitate. Shinkawa studied the incoming punches, locked in. Then, in a split second, he moved. A clean strike to the comedian's face, sharp, fast, and brutal. But the comedian hadn't fallen yet. He was still standing, shaken, yes, but strong. Inside, he was on high alert. Those counters were dangerous. If he wanted to keep fighting, he needed to change tactics. He decided to switch to the peekaboo style, a boxing stance where both arms are held up in front of the face, paired with constant head movement. The coach noticed immediately. There's no way a regular entertainer could use peekaboo like that, he muttered. This guy's no amateur. The comedian moved forward, bobbing and weaving with surprising skill. Shinkawa blinked, slightly thrown off, but he didn't break focus. He locked in on his target like a beast stalking prey, already imagining the man in front of him as one of those towering gladiators from his visions, hulking, brutal, and ready to kill. The comedian, stepping forward, launched a punch. Shinkawa slipped it effortlessly and landed a sharp counter right to the face. Before the man could recover, Shinkawa followed up another direct hit to the face. Cracks formed beneath the skin. The comedian, startled, covered his face in panic. But Shinkawa wasn't finished. A third punch hit the comedian's chin dead on. The blow was so clean and powerful, it dropped him instantly. Medical staff rushed into the ring without wasting a second. One of them called for an ambulance. The man was carried out on a stretcher. That's how badly Shinkawa had broken him. At ringside, the second comedian glanced toward Tomiko, clearly uncertain. She responded with a sweet, mocking expression that stung more than any words. Her tone left no room for hesitation, practically daring him to back out if he was too afraid to continue. The provocation hit its mark. Anger flared in the comedian's eyes as he clenched his fists and redirected his focus toward the ring, fueled now by wounded pride. Tomiko, still playing the role of a concerned professional, reminded him of the terms they had agreed to. Any injury would be his responsibility, and another loss could cost him his standing in the industry. She delivered it all with practiced grace, but every word was a quiet threat wrapped in a smile. Nearby, the coach observed the exchange with growing suspicion. There was something off about these so-called entertainers, something that didn't match the script. Tomiko flinched for a moment, then forced a smile. They're definitely entertainers. They don't hold professional licenses. This is just a hobby. They're amateurs, right? Suji wasn't buying it. That logic doesn't fly. Tomiko's smile didn't fade, but her tone sharpened. No one forced anyone. The contract's clear, and besides, she turned to Shinkawa. He doesn't look like he plans to quit, does he? The coach glanced at Shinkawa, standing in the ring with steady eyes. Idiot, he muttered. Suji spoke up beside him. Still, I don't think he's going to lose. The coach sighed and nodded. Yeah, me neither. In the ring, the second comedian stepped forward, his face fierce with rage. I'll kill him. Shinkawa didn't flinch. His gaze met the comedian's with quiet fire. He wasn't going to lose today. The bell rang. The second comedian attacked with a straight punch. Shinkawa ducked and stepped forward to counter, but the man swung wide, forcing Shinkawa to step back and lean away. The coach watched intently, noting the shift in pace. The opponent had grown more cautious, relying on his size and the constraints of boxing rules to gradually wear Shinkawa down. It was a slow, deliberate strategy, one designed to drain stamina, not finish the fight quickly. Tsuji asked, what should Shinkawa do? If he slips up even once, it could end badly. He needs to wait for an opening. Shinkawa remained composed, arms lifted in a tight guard mirroring his previous opponent's stance. The coach narrowed his eyes, recognizing the form peekaboo. It was a risky choice, especially against a heavyweight. Before he could process it further, Shinkawa lunged forward. The coach felt a jolt of dread. Closing the distance like that could end badly. The comedian, seeing the charge, scoffed at the tactic and rushed in to meet it. But Shinkawa slipped the first strike with ease and drove a solid blow into the man's side, forcing a sharp reaction. Without hesitation, he followed up with a clean shot to the face. The coach stood frozen, watching the unexpected precision unfold. Shinkawa had mastered more than he'd let on. Shinkawa pushed forward with relentless precision, one strike after another, each blow distorting the comedian's face under the pressure. The assault was unyielding. Another heavy punch landed flush, sending the man reeling backward. He reached out in desperation to shove Shinkawa away, but Shinkawa used his leg to create space, then stepped in with a sharp, decisive uppercut to the chin. From the sidelines, Tomiko flinched, visibly unsettled by the sudden shift in dominance. But the fight wasn't over, not yet, not even close. Shinkawa unleashed a savage barrage, fists moving like a machine with no pause between strikes. The comedian's face contorted under the relentless pressure, folding like soft dough beneath each crushing hit. The rhythm was brutal and merciless until the man finally collapsed, unconscious before he hit the mat. A second stretcher was called in. In the center of the ring, Shinkawa stood tall, drenched in sweat, chest rising steady, his presence radiating like a storm barely contained. Producer Hojo Tomiko was left stunned by how far things had strayed from the script. But to understand her shock, we need to rewind. Go for it. Sports Day was a universally popular variety show, but to her, something had always felt lacking. That missing piece revealed itself the day she accidentally tuned into an MMA match, specifically, one where the legendary Uo tension was dismantled inside the octagon. She watched, horrified yet entranced, as Uo took blow after blow. His skin split and blood streamed down. The audience sat in frozen disbelief, grimacing as Uo collapsed. It was the kind of scene that stuck in the soul, and standing above it all was the silent man responsible, Shinkawa, gazing down with an unreadable calm. From that moment, a plan slithered into Tomiko's mind. With public sentiment rallying against Shinkawa, the anti-Shinkawa wave was peaking. She saw opportunity. If they could pull Shinkawa onto their stage and break him down in front of a live audience, they wouldn't just win attention, they'd etch emotion into national memory. That was the scheme, but now it lay in ruins. As the second comedian was carted away on a stretcher, the male host, who, by the way, looked suspiciously different from last chapter, turned to Tomiko for guidance. Things were off script. Tomiko leaned in and whispered a new order: get Shinkawa to talk, push him until he slipped up. The host hurried over and asked Shinkawa why he had hit so hard that his opponent needed hospitalization. Shinkawa answered plainly. The man was a heavyweight, he responded accordingly. The host pushed again, reminding everyone they were just comedians. But Shinkawa, stone-faced, replied that if it was a joke, it didn't look like one without raising his voice. Shinkawa turned toward Tomiko and delivered a cutting remark. If their goal was to make a fool out of him, they should have brought more comedians. Then, with steady steps and calm resolve, he began to walk away. Each step echoed with quiet defiance, leaving no doubt that he wasn't about to entertain their games any longer. Tomiko hurried to block his path, insisting the filming wasn't over yet. But before she could say more, the coach stepped in, his tone firm and final. The scheduled filming time had expired. If the shoot ran late, that was no one's fault but their own. They were done, and without further hesitation, they left. Tomiko stood frozen, her face flushed and eyes blazing with barely contained fury. As they left the studio away, the coach muttered in disbelief. Shinkawa had fought using peekaboo style, but the coach never taught him that. When asked, Shinkawa genuinely claimed he didn't even know what peekaboo was. The coach demonstrated and Shinkawa just shrugged. He copied the first guy. That was it. The coach was stunned. Even Mike Tyson had to drill the peekaboo under custom motto for years, and Shinkawa, he just picked it up mid-fight and used it to take down a heavyweight. Shinkawa brushed it off, joking that Tyson didn't fight comedians, but the coach wasn't laughing. Those guys being comedians, that's just their gimmick. He stood in silence, eyes wide, then muttered that he needed time to process this. And just to note, for some reason, the artist drew the coach's mouth way too big in that panel. Honestly, it looked like his dentist charges rent just to work inside it. Still, the coach collected himself. A coach wasn't a critic. Their job wasn't just to analyze opponents, it was to understand their own fighter and guide them accordingly. And if this was Shinkawa's potential, maybe he didn't know him well enough after all. The aftermath hit the media hard. Some of the articles stated, "Comedian suffers brain damage after facing MMA champion Shinkawa on live TV." Uo and Shinkawa seen at airport together, like water off a duck's back. Before parting ways, Uo wished Shinkawa well, seeing him off at the airport. Tsuji also received her goodbyes, thanked for reporting the truth. Promises were exchanged to meet again after America. Then the scene shifted. We now find ourselves in the US, judging by the flag and a building labeled United Bank. On a street corner, a tall black man broad, calm handed bread to the homeless. One man asked about his rumored match against a Japanese fighter. The man smiled, humble. But peace didn't last. A thug showed up, already bloodied someone, and demanded drugs instead of food. The fighter stepped forward, voice steady. In his homeland, he said, people died in war without even a drop of water. The thug, enraged, lunged with a knife. But the fighter didn't flinch. He caught the blade with his bare hand. His voice dropped like steel. Only those prepared to die have the right to kill. Then he asked, was the thug ready? The thug was not ready. He let go of the knife and stepped back, but the fighter wasn't finished. He landed a right hook so powerful, the thug flew backward like he'd been hit by a truck. Honestly, that punch broke reality. The thug flew so far, birds probably paused midair to ask him for directions. And the fighter, towering above it all with that massive frame, didn't just end the fight. He stood there like a man who expects you to subscribe and like the video. The scene transitions to Tsuji as she prepares to introduce the next segment. She announces it's time for the show Rank 7, a program focused on the most talked about topics in the fighting world. Today's spotlight is on a rising legend, Kento Shinkawa. Before diving into the main story, Tsuji welcomes a special guest, former FFC flyweight champion Kimi Hatanaka. Now retired from MMA, Kimi works as a jiu-jitsu and circuit training coach. Tsuji begins by asking if Kimi has been following Shinkawa's recent matches. Kimi confirms she's seen them all. The conversation shifts to a recent incident that occurred during the Go For It Sports Day show. Tsuji asks if Kimi is aware of it. Kimi responds that an acquaintance had mentioned it to her, and interestingly, she once experienced something similar herself. Tsuji explains that instead of showing the edited broadcast version, they'll review raw footage captured directly at the event. She asks Kimi to watch closely as they analyze what took place that day. As the footage rolls, Tsuji points out the clear size difference between Shinkawa and his opponent. Kimi observes there's likely a 20-kilogram gap between them. But what surprises her more is how composed Shinkawa appears. She remarks that although the opponent is labeled a comedian, his movements suggest otherwise. His balance remains steady even during full swings, and the volume of punches he throws per minute doesn't match that of an amateur. To her, his skill level is undoubtedly professional. His opponent is larger and with longer reach, has significantly more punching power. Normally, someone in Shinkawa's position wouldn't stand a chance, but his ability to switch rapidly between infighting and outboxing is impressive. Still, there's a problem. No matter how much he moves or adapts, his attacks don't seem to be doing real damage. Then something catches Kimi off guard. She notices that Shinkawa's punches are consistently landing, not just on the face but on the abdomen as well, an area padded with fat. It's strange. Tsuji adds that Coach Shiraishi once mentioned something similar but questioned whether it was even possible. Kimi tells her to pay close attention to the form of Shinkawa's punches. He's using a technique known as the screw punch, engaging his rotator cuff to create torque. Tsuji points out that such a punch puts immense strain on the shoulder. Kimi nods. He must know the risk, but he's still doing it. He's willing to sacrifice his shoulder for the win. Concern creeps into Tsuji's thoughts. Is Shinkawa's shoulder really going to hold up? The scene shifts to Shinkawa sitting inside a bus, quietly rubbing his shoulder. Beside him, his coach sleeps soundly. Shinkawa's discomfort is visible, a silent consequence of his intense effort. Eventually, the coach wakes up, groggy from jet lag. He comments on how brutal the schedule has been, a match in America only 2 weeks after the championship fight. He's exhausted just from travel, and Shinkawa, on top of everything, is cutting weight. Still, Shinkawa brushes it off. He's naturally a short sleeper and used to this pace. He then shows the coach a video of a fighter, Rose and Konoren. Though still unranked, Rose is on a 3-win streak and packs serious power. The footage shows him obliterating an opponent with a devastating hook. The coach notes that the UFC roster is deep. It's not like domestic leagues where it's easier to rise. Shinkawa acknowledges Rose's strength. The coach agrees there are no weak fighters in UFC. Shinkawa adds that it's not just strength, Rose doesn't go down easily. The coach heard somewhere about Rose's tough childhood. He says it's probably pride, what drives a man who chose fighting as a means to survive. The words strike a chord in Shinkawa. The coach reminds him, don't let your guard down, but don't be too tense either. Shinkawa has knocked out 2 heavyweights in boxing. His fists are the real deal. If he lands a clean shot, he can take down anyone. Shinkawa looks down at his fist, clenching it tightly. Meanwhile, in a steam-filled bathhouse, Rose sits as his coach wraps his hands in bandages. The coach shakes his head. He can't believe Rose grabbed a knife with bare hands despite having a match coming up. Rose speaks calmly. Since the age of 10, he worked with a pickaxe every day. His hands were constantly blistered and bleeding, but he had no choice. He would wrap them and keep going. The coach, looking at the towering man before him, says he's come a long way. As hot water is poured into the bath, the coach adds bath salts from a suitcase. He explains that soaking in salted water promotes sweating through osmosis. He dips his own hand in, pulling it out red from the heat. Now it's Shinkawa's turn. He enters the bath with a tense expression. The coach asks if he's okay. Shinkawa replies that he'll manage. If he stays in too long, he might get dizzy, so after 10 minutes, they'll switch to an electric blanket. Sweat pours down his face. Meanwhile, Rose sits inside a sauna, drenched in sweat. His coach asks if he can handle the heat. Rose answers without hesitation, it was always this hot back home. The scene transitions to a memory of a young, dark-skinned boy leaning on a pickaxe, mirroring an image of Shinkawa dressed like a slave and leaning on a spear. Returning to the present, Shinkawa lies on a bed wrapped in sheets, mentally repeating the phrase that what does not kill him makes him stronger, nodding the outcome from a German philosopher. His coach teases him, questioning if he has finally attained enlightenment through hardship, which prompts Shinkawa to smile subtly. Observing this, the coach chuckles, wondering how Shinkawa can laugh at such a moment and whether he is still in his right mind, to which Shinkawa agrees while maintaining a faint smile. The coach then warns him that his lips are so dry he might bleed if he laughs any harder. At last, the pivotal moment arrives as the fighters stand face to face amidst the clicking of cameras, the air thick with tension while Shinkawa and Rose lock eyes with fierce determination, standing tall and ready for the storm to come. At that intense moment, Rose signaled with his hand that he intended to kill Shinkawa, declaring that he would use Shinkawa as a stepping stone. Shinkawa remained silent, simply watching him without response. Nearby, someone holding a whiskey glass called out the name John and asked if that was the guy they had been expecting. John confirmed that it was Shinkawa, the man who had defeated the FFC champion in just 2 matches and had beaten an MMA champion 2 weeks earlier. John Shalby himself was the UFC's number 2. The man beside John, Dana Heyman, a UFC representative, remarked that Shinkawa did not look like much. As Shinkawa and Rose posed for the cameras, Dana noted that despite the match not being the main event, Shinkawa's recent fight just 2 weeks ago made this test match seem less serious, which Dana disapproved of. John responded that, on the contrary, Shinkawa seemed desperate. Dana acknowledged Rose as a beast, someone destined to reach the top, and insisted that he would not lose to an opponent like Shinkawa. John countered that all of this would be confirmed tomorrow during the test match. In the building where Shinkawa and his coach were staying, the coach mentioned that he had hoped to find a good Japanese restaurant nearby, but all were closed. Shinkawa, eating soup said porridge was perfectly fine with him. The coach intently watched Shinkawa eat, then noticed something and asked him to raise his right hand. Shinkawa trembled as he complied. The coach asked since when it had been hurting. Shinkawa admitted that his right arm hurt slightly when throwing a punch. The coach, distressed, yelled, questioning why Shinkawa had kept such an important injury secret until now. He insisted that if it was from training, it had not just happened recently. Shinkawa replied that he had feared the coach would tell him not to fight. The coach scolded him, questioning how he could plan a fight under such conditions. Taking responsibility, the coach admitted he should have noticed without being told and sighed, lamenting how reckless it was to schedule a match with only a 2-week break. He confessed to being too greedy when Shinkawa claimed he could manage it and warned that even tough humans have limits, implying that Shinkawa might regret this decision for the rest of his life. Shinkawa then called the coach and explained why he had not given up despite losing 10 times in a row. He said it was because the coach had always been there to support him, and that the belief someone had in him was something he had never experienced before. Hearing this, the coach was surprised and asked why Shinkawa had gone this far, questioning whether the match was more important than his entire career as a fighter. Shinkawa confirmed it was, stating that fighting was what he lived for. The coach expressed surprise again, and Shinkawa continued, saying he did not care about his current condition or his right shoulder, he was not defined by it. The coach expressed dissatisfaction with this answer, but Shinkawa grabbed the coach's hand and placed it near his heart, asking if he understood now. The coach replied that he understood better than anyone how significant this opportunity was, which was why he was so upset with himself. Frustrated and holding his head, the coach admitted there was nothing he could do. Calmly, Shinkawa replied that was not true and assured him he was not alone, adding that their support was more than enough. The coach relented, patting Shinkawa's head and suggesting that if this was how he felt, perhaps he should try listening to him for once. The next day elsewhere, Rose trained with his coach, declaring his intention to tear the Asian fighter to shreds. His coach hyped him up, urging him to fight as if his life depended on it and to beat his opponent to a pulp. Rose continued his training with determination as his coach commented that Rose was fighting for this day and should give it his all. Rose confidently claimed to be the strongest in the world and persisted with his training. At the arena, with half the seats filled, Shinkawa wrapped his hands in the dressing room. The coach asked if the wrapping was too tight but advised that he would not tell Shinkawa to hold back. If the coach were going to say that, they would not have come this far. While wrapping Shinkawa's hands, the coach warned that if Shinkawa lost due to injury, he would not have won anyway. He emphasized that it did not matter whether the opponent was Rose, Wine, or anyone else. Losing to an unranked fighter would mean Shinkawa might as well pack up and go home. The coach urged Shinkawa to fight with the resolve to kill his opponent even if it meant sacrificing his body, assuring him the referee would stop the fight if it became too dangerous. With determination, Shinkawa and his coach exchanged a resolute stare. In the octagon, both fighters, Rose and Shinkawa, prepared to face off, the only thing holding them back being the referee who had yet to announce the start of the fight. Once the referee signaled the beginning, both fighters immediately threw punches. Shinkawa's punch connected while he successfully dodged Rose's strike. Before the first strike is thrown, we rewind just a bit. The arena roars, the announcer's voice booms across the stadium, setting the tone for what's to come. The announcer introduced the fighters to the roaring crowd, declaring that the wait was finally over for fans across the nation. In the blue corner stood an MMA fighter, measuring 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighing in at 155 pounds, Shinkawa Kento, who remained unreactive. In the red corner was a kickboxer with a professional record of 3 wins and no losses, standing at 5 feet 11 inches and also weighing 155 pounds, Rose Inconoran, who raised his hand and roared like a beast. At a homeless shelter in San Francisco, people cheered loudly in support of their Rose. One of them encouraged others to place their bets before the match started, but a woman interrupted, scolding them and reminding them that someone had just been caught betting and was now trying again. The man replied that no one would bet on anyone but Rose anyway, so it wouldn't even count. Back at the arena, John remarked that Dana could probably tell the betting odds just from the crowd's cheers. He guessed the odds were around 7-3, but Dana disagreed, estimating them at 9-1. Dana added that even if the match wasn't the main event, it still needed some excitement, and as long as it wasn't boring, they should be grateful. The referee then addressed the fighters, asking if they were ready and instructing them to fight fair and square. After they touched gloves, he signaled for the match to begin. Both throw punches instantly. Shinkawa's punch connects while dodging Rose's punch. The coach, the audience were all shocked that the one that received the punch was Rose while Shinkawa dodged. Rose was startled when he realized that Shinkawa is using southpaw. The coach thought it made sense. If Shinkawa's right arm was compromised, using a southpaw stance was the right choice. Shinkawa launched a straight punch, but it missed, allowing Rose to counter and drive forward, pushing Shinkawa back. Rose believed Shinkawa was trying to win with southpaw and continued his assault, but Shinkawa remained unfazed. Both fighters paused momentarily, staring each other down. Rose's coach instructed him not to trade blows and to circle out, while Coach Shiraishi noted that Rose was quick to adapt, moving like someone with experience fighting southpaws. Rose believed that Shinkawa had switched to southpaw out of fear and that his coach's strategies wouldn't work on a true southpaw like him. From the moment Shinkawa approached with such a passive trick, Rose felt he had already won. Shinkawa threw another straight punch, but Rose narrowly dodged it. Without hesitation, Shinkawa followed up with a punch using his right arm, which Rose easily evaded. Shinkawa felt pain shoot through his arm, and Rose quickly noticed the lack of power in Shinkawa's strikes. He began to suspect that Shinkawa was only faking a southpaw stance to hide an injury in his right arm and resolved to stop holding back. Rose launched a devastating punch that landed hard. Coach Shiraishi yelled for Shinkawa not to let Rose circle out, but Rose continued his relentless attack. Shinkawa attempted to strike back, but Rose overwhelmed him again. Even as Shinkawa tried to counter, his punch missed, and Rose's coach shouted that this was his chance. Rose capitalized, landing another powerful blow directly to Shinkawa's face, the impact contorting it with force. Shiraishi shouted for Shinkawa to stay calm and create distance. In response, Shinkawa fired back with another punch, which Rose took head-on, thinking he didn't need to hold back against a weakling like Shinkawa. Shinkawa attacked again, but Rose countered with a direct strike to the face, the power of it sending Shinkawa stumbling backward. Rose, uncaring about Shinkawa's injured arm, reminded himself that this was a battlefield, kill or be killed. In his mind, the fight transformed into a battlefield where Shinkawa's right arm had been pierced by an arrow. Disoriented and losing consciousness, he began to fall. Seeing this, Rose believed Shinkawa had finally realized that his tricks would no longer work. Clenching his fist, Rose prepared to deliver the final, finishing blow. But as Shinkawa collapsed, he raised his right arm, startling Rose. The sight made Rose hesitate. He couldn't believe Shinkawa was actually using that arm. In the next instant, Shinkawa launched a punch with his right hand, landing an explosive blow directly to Rose's face. Rose took the punch and brushed it off, commenting internally that the impact was nothing to worry about. However, Shinkawa was not finished. He had already ducked low and rushed forward, tackling Rose and grabbing hold of his leg. Rose quickly realized what was happening. Shinkawa couldn't keep up in a striking exchange, so he was switching to grappling. Determined not to be outdone, Rose planned to crush Shinkawa's carotid artery and launched an attack while being grappled. Coach Shiraishi screamed for Shinkawa to watch out for the guillotine, but Shinkawa, using every ounce of his strength, lifted Rose off the ground. Panic flashed across Rose's face as he grasped what was about to happen. Shiraishi recognized that the tackle had been a good decision. Shinkawa then slammed Rose down with a bone-rattling impact, stunning everyone in the arena. Even at the homeless shelter, people were distressed to see Rose mounted. Rose tried to scramble back into position, but Shinkawa didn't allow him the chance. Pressing him down and wrapping his arms tightly around Rose's waist, Shinkawa lifted his opponent's massive frame once again. Shiraishi could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Arching his body backward to maximize the force, Shinkawa executed a perfect suplex. He even jumped back to amplify the power. Dana and John stood frozen, stunned that someone had just suplexed Rose of all people. Rose slammed into the mat flat on his back with a thunderous crash. Shinkawa stood back up immediately, grabbed Rose again, locked his arms, and lifted him once more. Dana looked on in awe as Shinkawa continued what could only be described as Suplex City. He executed the move again, delivering another brutal slam that left the crowd in disbelief. How could someone overpower Rose like this? Rose, battered but not yet defeated, picked himself up, thinking to himself that he would never return to the life he had escaped, that he was meant to win. But Shinkawa gave him no room to breathe. With steely determination, he performed a third suplex, slamming Rose down and completing the relentless assault. Dana, watching from ringside, could barely contain his excitement. Without hesitation, Shinkawa transitioned into an arm lock, twisting Rose's limb with calculated pressure. Rose began to feel immense pain as his coach shouted for him to tap out before his arm broke. Shinkawa maintained control, locking the joint and forcing it to bend unnaturally, tightening his hold and preventing any escape. At last, Rose tapped out. The referee quickly moved in to signal the end of the match. The entire arena fell into stunned silence, frozen by the unexpected outcome. Shinkawa stood tall over the defeated Rose, while Rose, flat on his back, reflected on how he had always entered each match prepared to kill, believing that if he didn't, he would be the one to die. But now he wondered, what exactly was Shinkawa fighting for? The audience sat in deep thought, reflecting on what they had just witnessed. For an undercard fight, it had been nothing short of extraordinary. Many believed they were lucky to have seen it live, and those who only tuned in for the main event would miss out on something unforgettable. Dana rose from his seat, walked up to the announcer, and took the microphone. He declared to the crowd that what they had just witnessed was absolutely brilliant. Everyone had seen it. This was why tickets sold like crazy. He admitted that during the face-off, he had thought Shinkawa was boring and had no idea this side of him existed. Shinkawa said nothing, standing in silence. Dana teased him, asking if he had turned into a shy little girl after the match, urging him to say something. Shinkawa stood tall as Dana pointed at him and declared that he was the true star of the night, that there was no need to even watch the main event because Shinkawa had already stolen the show. Shinkawa then asked if that meant he could fight in the UFC. Dana confirmed enthusiastically, promising to put him in so many fights he would grow sick of it. He told Shinkawa to drink as much as he wanted and enjoy himself that night. The crowd roared with excitement and approval, cheering wildly as Shinkawa stood tall under the deafening celebration of the arena. That night at a nightclub, the music pounded and lights flashed in every direction as bodies moved in rhythm, dancing close together in a room thick with heat, motion, and energy. Amidst the lively scene, Dana, John, Shinkawa, and Shiraishi sat together at a table, enjoying the night, though Shinkawa seemed distinctly out of place, silent and tense in contrast to the relaxed atmosphere. Dana turned to Shiraishi with a grin and called him Octopus, joking that it had been a while. Shiraishi groaned, telling him to stop calling him that or he'd go bald from the stress. Dana explained that Octopus had been the ring name he gave Shiraishi back when he was fighting in the UFC, praising Shiraishi's exceptional jiu-jitsu. Whether it was wrestling, judo, or anything else, Shiraishi had been unstoppable. When he pinned opponents down, Dana recalled, he looked just like an octopus. Dana then added that Shinkawa would need a ring name too. He continued, nodding how Shinkawa might normally be shy, but once he stepped into the ring, he became a beast. With that duality, Dana suggested the name Janus, a reference to the two-faced Roman god. Shinkawa, sweating and silent, didn't respond. He stared out at the crowd dancing on the floor, but in his eyes, the dancing people transformed into warriors locked in battle. Noticing Shinkawa's distant gaze, Shiraishi watched him with concern. Dana turned to Shiraishi, offering congratulations and remarking that he had wondered who could have trained such an incredible fighter. Of course, it was a legend like him. Dana said he'd send the draft of Shinkawa's contract first thing in the morning and asked for their hotel information. At a university hospital, the receptionist recognized Shinkawa, commenting to a colleague that they'd heard he was going to the UFC and had even defeated an MMA champion recently. The doctor, noticing the receptionist watching a video of Shinkawa's fight, asked why he hadn't come in lately. The receptionist said she wasn't sure. On the surface he seemed fine, but the doctor wondered silently if Shinkawa had truly recovered. She shrugged it off, muttering that he looked okay. In Sacramento, Shiraishi and Shinkawa waited for their taxi, but Shinkawa stood silently in the shadows, a dark and ominous aura about him. Shiraishi tried to keep things light, mentioning that in America they only broadcast the main fights, but in Japan, thanks to the UFC's media contract, even undercard bouts featuring Japanese fighters were shown live. That meant Shinkawa would be earning a good sum, especially with the $50,000 bonus he received for performance of the night. It reminded Shiraishi of his own days in the UFC. But as he spoke, Shiraishi noticed something was wrong. Shinkawa was drenched in sweat. Concerned, he asked if Shinkawa was feeling all right, nodding that he'd been acting strangely all evening. Reaching out to touch him, Shiraishi was suddenly grabbed by the wrist. Shinkawa glared at him with a cold, vacant stare. The coach flinched, startled, just as Shinkawa suddenly threw a punch. Shiraishi ducked and dodged the blow. Realizing something was deeply wrong, Shiraishi demanded to know what was happening. The scene flashed in his memory, Shinkawa's wrecked room on that distant day. He remembered calling out to him and getting no response. Shinkawa launched into a frenzied barrage of punches. But Shiraishi was no ordinary coach. With fluid, practiced movements, he dodged and weaved, evading each strike. When the moment came, he ducked low, rushed forward, and grabbed Shinkawa's leg, rolling and slamming him to the ground before locking him in a leg hold. Shiraishi yelled at Shinkawa to calm down, his voice filled with frustration and urgency. Demanding a tap-out to prove he was back in his right mind, Shiraishi held the pressure, but Shinkawa lashed out, kicking him and breaking free. Standing again, Shinkawa escaped the leg lock. Shiraishi, catching his breath, remarked that he knew Shinkawa had a habit of sleeping with his eyes open, but this was going too far. Shinkawa rushed him again, this time grappling him around the waist and shoving him backward. At that moment, a car passed by, narrowly missing the coach. Reacting instinctively, Shiraishi planted his foot firmly, wrapped his arms around Shinkawa's head, locked his legs around his opponent's body, and applied a chokehold. Slowly, Shinkawa's resistance faded until he stopped moving. Shiraishi sighed in relief, recognizing that the episode had finally passed. Just then, the taxi arrived. The driver stepped out, and together, he and Shiraishi lifted Shinkawa and placed him inside the car. The driver, clearly uneasy, asked if what had just happened was some kind of crime. Shiraishi reassured him it wasn't, and with that, they drove off into the night. After some time inside the car, Shinkawa spoke up, saying he had experienced a nightmare and that yesterday's incident had been caused by sleepwalking. He described it as a terrible dream. The coach replied that it was dangerous to dismiss the situation as just a dream, urging Shinkawa to get a proper medical examination. Shinkawa admitted that he had been going to the hospital, though the treatment hadn't seemed effective. Perhaps he had simply pushed himself too hard the day before. Still, he reassured the coach that he understood the concern and promised to go again after returning to Japan. The coach then remarked that Shinkawa's grappling needed serious work, especially his no-gi skills, and suggested that they focus on practicing jiu-jitsu without a traditional gi. Shinkawa agreed with the coach. At a high-end restaurant, Shinkawa, his coach, and Dana dined together. The coach brought up the contract clause. Shinkawa's fight money would be multiplied by 10 if he knocked out all 3 opponents. He called it a bold proposal. Dana reminded them that the organization was multinational and most new fighters couldn't speak English. Shinkawa asked if English was that important. Dana said showmanship made money and fluency was a major advantage. Pointed out that Shinkawa, fluent in English, was more talented than Octopus during his fighting days. Irritated, the coach told Dana to stop calling him that. Dana accepted and acknowledged the proposal Octopus had made. The coach, shifting tone, said fighters should respect the ring names fans give them. Dana stood and said he would send the contract immediately. After he left, the coach noted Dana valued Shinkawa more than expected and wondered if they should have also negotiated a pay-per-view deal. Shinkawa replied he thought Dana was a modest man. The coach said hesitation in negotiations meant defeat. Since they were paying, they'd expect results, maybe even match Shinkawa with someone extreme to avoid the payout. Shinkawa said he welcomed the challenge. On the day of their return to Japan at the airport, Shinkawa and the coach stood with their luggage. Shinkawa checked his phone and saw that the money had been deposited into his account. He reflected on how the money he had once desperately needed was now increasing on its own. What had changed between then and now? He thanked the coach, saying it was all thanks to him. After chatting for a bit, the coach mentioned he had a match coming up, so he was heading to the gym. He advised Shinkawa to go to the hospital immediately and get checked, and to let him know when he was done. Shinkawa agreed and told him to consider getting some counseling too, as they parted ways. At the hospital, Shinkawa underwent a routine checkup and shoulder examination. The doctor asked when the injury had occurred, and Shinkawa said it had been 3 days ago. The doctor asked if he had iced it, but Shinkawa explained that the situation didn't allow for that. The doctor noted that ideally icing should be done immediately to reduce inflammation. Shinkawa responded that he would do so when he got back, but the doctor told him it wouldn't be necessary. There was almost no swelling. Shinkawa agreed, adding that the pain had already started to subside the day after the fight. The doctor, intrigued, explained a phenomenon known as migratory fish-type muscles. In his experience with many athletes, he had found little fundamental difference between their muscles and those of ordinary people. Using a small anatomical model, the doctor demonstrated that during Shinkawa's fight, there had been signs of damage in his shoulder, back, and thighs. Shinkawa confirmed he had felt intense pain immediately after the match. The doctor explained further, when muscles undergo stress from awkward movements, they can become tangled like threads. This compresses blood vessels, preventing the removal of impurities and leading to inflammation and stiffness, eventually making even slight movement painful. Shinkawa asked if his condition was serious, wondering if he shouldn't push himself anymore. But the doctor shook his head. On the contrary, Shinkawa's muscles were in pristine condition, comparable to that of a child. The doctor explained that this muscle type was highly resistant to damage and recovered quickly, hence the nickname migratory fish type. Shinkawa admitted he had initially taken that term negatively, and the doctor chuckled, saying that was probably why he'd looked so tense. Later at the university hospital, Shinkawa shared the news about his unusual muscle type with his personal doctor. She looked at him, confused, and asked why he was telling her this. Shinkawa then asked if she was aware of cases where non-functioning nerves had regenerated or where miraculous recoveries had occurred. She replied that she had heard of such rare cases but that it was outside her expertise. Shinkawa mused aloud, suggesting that such people likely had a strong homeostasis, the body's natural tendency to return to its original state. The doctor then asked if he was implying that he was reverting to the body he had in his dreams back when he was a slave fighter in another world. Without warning, Shinkawa began to take off his shirt. The doctor, confused, asked what he was doing, but Shinkawa pointed to his back. She looked but couldn't see anything unusual. Shinkawa explained that when he returned to this world, his movements still carried over from that other place. His body couldn't handle the strain and bruises formed continually until his fight with Oji. After the FFC title match and the rapid weight cut that followed, the phenomena gradually lessened. By the time he returned from overseas, the bruises had completely disappeared. Though he still experienced some pain, his recovery had become noticeably faster. The doctor observed his rushed speech and concluded he didn't want to give her space to respond. She pointed out that he was referring to the other world rather than calling it a dream, and asked if he had now decided to believe this reality was the real one. Shinkawa replied that this was what he had chosen to believe. She noted with concern that his delusions were beginning to override his grasp on reality. Then she asked if he had taken the medication she had prescribed last time. He admitted he had thrown it away. Rising to his feet, Shinkawa declared that it no longer mattered to him whether it was a dream or reality. What mattered was that those experiences had shaped who he was. The doctor countered that rather than reverting to a former body, his increased recovery was likely the result of rigorous training. Shinkawa, addressing her formally as doctor, said that the reason he had continued coming for checkups all this time was because he feared he might be pulled back into that other world. But now, he no longer needed to worry about that. The doctor, rising from her chair, sternly warned him that she could submit a medical report to the UFC recommending the cancellation of his fights. Shinkawa calmly replied that it wouldn't be necessary. After all, every fighter had physical and psychological abnormalities to some degree. He asked if she really believed the UFC would take her words seriously. Frustrated, the doctor began recording a note for the medical record, stating that the patient had refused treatment. She noted that while he had initially claimed to have vivid dreams, he now believed he had actually visited another world. He had discarded his prescribed medication and had likely been off it for some time, placing him in an extremely dangerous state. She expressed her exasperation, unsure how to proceed.